If I own a house, yeah, I'm paying $1,200 a month. But at the end of that, I owe this. Hopefully the market says that my house is this, and then I literally get all that money back plus. Right. So when I have a client and they're like really bulking on that payment, I try to like, look, we're building wealth here. Yeah. You cannot afford to keep renting. If you want, you need to buy, and you need to buy now.
Welcome to the Disruptance Podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric Forney and Michael Bounds.
Mike, every week on the show, we aim to disrupt the way real estate agents and entrepreneurs think about life and their business. And this week, what I aim to disrupt is the way that people think about wealth. In fact, I believe that the train is about to leave the station. You know, we're a quarter of the way through 2021, and now is the last opportunity for wealth building. The way things have been done in the U.S. for roughly the last 100 years, the train leaves the station now, the last opportunity for wealth building, because residential real estate has been single-handedly the largest storehold of wealth for the U.S. economy in the post-modern war era. And right now, that train is leaving the station. 20% of all homes being acquired right now are non-owner occupied, which means we will even further divide the wealth to the haves and the have-nots. You either own a home now and you're seeing your asset value go up, or you do not own a home and you're seeing the wealth divide continue to widen. And therefore, despite the fact that we have rising prices, if you don't jump on the train, it will leave you behind.
It's going to take a reimagining of the way we think of buying houses and living is going to have to it's eventually going to have to either change, or you're right. This week I had a listing, went $35,000 over asking, and it was a hedge fund. Cash. Like everybody, I had all these people that wanted to buy the house. They're first time home buyers, or a hedge fund came in, boom, $35,000 over asking. How do you compete with that?
And what happened?
That was going to be my question too, is how do you compete? I mean, I know you can. I think about it from the lens though of like the millennial Gen Z perspective of how do you compete with that?
Yeah.
And the reality
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
The reality is that if you're not, the only thing that you can compete with is you have to have homeowner compassion, right? The seller has to choose to care more about one homeowner than they can care about their own wealth. And that's a huge amount of risk to take. That's not likely going to happen, right? A seller is going to select the guarantee or the more guaranteed cash option and go that way all the time.
I mean, that scale. I mean, my job is to be a fiduciary to my client. I present to my client, okay, here are the 10, 12 offers. You know, all these, they can offer up to a certain amount, and then we may have appraisal issues. But if this person's going way out of that scope and they're paying cash, then like, what do you do with that?
And are investors like big corporations, are they all just buying houses over asking price that much because they're just not worried about reselling them down the road? They're just like, we just need to own assets.
Well, part of it is, it's multifaceted. You look at, the debasing of the dollar by injecting inflation from a supply inflation perspective means that your money becomes worth less every day the more you add to it. And with nearly 40% more dollars in circulation, your money is worth less today than it was a year ago, despite what Jerome Powell and the money printer tell you. Math is math. 40% more supply equals a reduction in spending power. And so what you see is that asset-backed liabilities actually build wealth in this market. So if a hedge fund is getting money at 0% or a quarter, despite the fact that mortgage rates for the consumer are 3 to 3.25,
right?
If the yield is 0%, or if that's what the Fed interest rate is, a $30 billion hedge fund is probably borrowing somewhere at 0.25 to 0.75%. paying almost no interest at all, which means they're getting a bigger tax deduction than they are in interest expense.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's like a
They're
tax
making money.
incentive,
Yeah.
kind of based off a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about tax write-offs, and that like is that one big incentive for
They're
the big
playing
investors
chess and the homeowner is playing checkers. It's just a totally different game. What they're trying to do is over a long haul, they're just acquiring all these assets, and then it's like an ATM machine. They've got systems and models where they can bring people in, rent them out, have property managers, and then over time, it's literally an ATM machine where I am buying it because I want to live there. It's just two different games.
Yeah,
That's good.
it's I mean, one is an asset and one is as a luxury.
Right.
Truly, if you look at it that way, that goes, yes, a human need is shelter and provision, right? However, anything above shelter and provision becomes luxury. Because what we know is that everywhere else on the globe, for the most part, America has some of the best housing and expectations of housing. You know, you go to Mexico, almost every house we have is luxury comparatively, right? And so when you look at it from the framework that we're basically looking at the homeowner's luxury, the hedge fund is asset. When you control 20% of the supply or 20% of the demand, however you look at it, you also have the ability to artificially impact the market.
Yeah, because that's a big chunk. You own a big chunk of the pie just in that 20%, where everything else is fragmented.
Yeah.
When did you guys start noticing more investors buying up houses? I remember there was like, I don't know, American Homes for Rent was like the first one I was aware of. That was just like, there were some realtors that I was around that were just cleaning up because they would get in with some of these new American Homes for Rent people, and they would just be selling houses like crazy. But then the American Homes for Rent ended up having their own people, and they skipped the realtor, and then all of a sudden they were just paying somebody a salary to find homes and buy homes.
So what we've been talking about is you better build a Walmart or you're going to be working for Walmart. What you're seeing is a split from high producers. Like there's only so many of those American Homes for Rent. So if you don't have the luxury of partnering up with that, you're right. When I'm meeting with real estate agents, they're all telling me that there's a hamster wheel and they're tired and they're working with buyers and they're trying to figure it out. And what I've been telling them is you better get used to it.
It's not stopping anytime soon.
It's not stopping. Like the problem that we're having right now, it's supply and demand, and we have way more demand and not enough supply. And
there's no fixing the supply right now.
Yeah, you can't build
no
yourself
supply
out of
fix.
it because for the last 10 years we haven't built anything.
Yeah,
that was what I was going to ask. So with supply, there, it's like the old thing was like the old thing back in like 2015 probably was, well, if you can't find your house, build it.
Right.
Well, what's like the status with that now?
I mean, it still makes sense. The reality is, if you think about it, the fact that this is the last opportunity to build wealth, it doesn't matter whether you're building it or whether you're buying it. Is if you're not doing leveraged assets right now in an inflating monetary system, the train will pass you by while you stand and watch it from a wealth perspective. So yes, the cost of materials, commodities is accelerating at a rapid pace, right? We all know that lumber has gone 2 to 3x.
Yeah.
Appliances, back ordered, prices up. And miraculously, right, this is all going to cure itself post pandemic, and I'll hold my breath for that. But the fact that like we don't yet know the price of new construction or what it will appreciate to, there are no fixes in sight to solve the actual epidemic, the epidemic of the fact that the wealth divide is waging war within residential real estate, and there is no solution for it. There is no vaccine in the works for the epidemic of wealth divide in residential real estate because there's no one teaching construction. There's no one in the government office making it easier to build houses and develop municipalities. And material costs are rapidly accelerating while hedge funds borrow at a sub 1% interest rate. That's an awful lot of constraints on demand and on supply with no solution currently even being discussed.
That's the thing that really bothers me, is that this is legit. Like, this is really happening and nobody, like, it's crickets. Yeah. It's literally crickets. Like, and I get it. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's social unrest. There's a lot of stuff going on. You know, kids aren't going to school. Like, you know, there's the economy. But like the ripple.
This is
like
an epidemic.
The ripple, like when I was 19, this is the thing. I would not be sitting here today. One day when I was 19 years old, I drove by a house that had a for sale sign on it. And I called the for sale sign, and the realtor talked to me. I was going to rent, and he talked to me about buying a house. And in the middle of buying that house, I loved the whole process. And I'm literally sitting here today.
You're one of the few.
If that were, there's something that happened in that process. What's crazy is that if that happened today, I would not be, I don't know where I would be. Because
absolutely.
I had a 19-year-old kid driving by a house. There is no way that I could afford it.
I'm with you, by the way. I tell agents this all the time. I bought a house with mold. I had $8,000. That was my down payment. I borrowed more money from FHA to make the repairs and get the house with sweat equity into a position where I was able to cash it out and then fund a business based on the amount of like labor and updates that I put into it. But I didn't have any money when I went into it. The problem now is that if I'm 25 years old and I'm trying to do that right now, good luck. Like I'm not going to be the old man who sits around and tells Gen Z that this is exactly what you should do, exactly what I did, because the marketplace is drastically different today than it was before. The problem though is the longer you sit around and wait for something to save you or to get better, the worse it's going to get.
I have a lady. I started messing with her 5 years ago. I remember meeting with her at Dairy Queen in Cumberland. I remember sitting down with her family. I bought all the kids like ice cream, and I was going to build her a house, a 4-bedroom house with Davis over in the Hanover North for $135,000.
How much would that be today?
Every 2 years she calls me and she wants to meet. And it was, I can build you a 4-bedroom house. Okay, I can build you a 3-bedroom ranch. Okay, I can't build you a house, or I can find you something existing that's 4 bedrooms. Okay, now it's a ranch. Now it's a.
What are people afraid of? Because you do see that, by the way. You see people who aren't stepping up and doing what's required.
I think the process is so intimidating. Like I remember when, like,
have you ever bought a car? Because that's worse.
Yeah. Buying a car sucks, but like I think that's all the paperwork. I remember when I bought my first house, I was 21. Was it 21?
Yeah, you were 21 because I did it before 21.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
And gosh, I was the old man. I'm the old man of the group.
You know what it was? Though,
it was like 2 months before I turned 21. I was like,
But it was like $140,000 in Avon on the west side. Okay. And then I ended up regret it so much. My brother bought it from me for like $145 or something.
Yeah.
You flipped it for $5,000.
I just need to get out of it. It's fine.
Right.
Kate and I are going to buy a house.
Yeah.
So I just need one house. And like looking back, I even had 2 roommates paying my mortgage for me. Like, it was an ideal situation, and I sold it. And then
we just didn't know.
Okay, perfect.
We didn't know.
This dude profited off it.
I know.
Okay, so perfect.
You could have like cleaned up.
I could.
Yes.
You could have like kept going.
We could have kept it. We could have kept it in his name. The new house was in mine.
It the fact, and I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's break that down, because I think that if we look at tangible, I actually have talked to some agents who are about to make this exact same mistake that you guys made. And what I hear you saying is that you lacked long-term perspective.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. And so the person who's worried about buying right now is lacking the long-term perspective of seeing that you have a choice to make. You have 2 options. You're either owning or you're renting.
Yeah.
You have an 80 times greater net worth to own right now.
Yeah.
Which means that if you compound that 20 years from now, because you're going to buy it and hold it and never sell it, which is the right answer.
Yes.
Then now you're playing the hedge fund game. You're not selling your liability backed asset, which is appreciating, which is giving you tax benefits, which is allowing you to depreciate it, receive some cash flow, and it becomes more and more and more scarce. Short of 3D printing or automation in the home construction industry, the values of the homes at this point there's no solution for them to go down.
Yeah.
So you have to have a long-term perspective, which means if you can financially afford to keep your house and rent it out, you keep it. Because that way you now have two appreciating assets that are leveraged by debt working for you.
Right.
And then go buy another one and do that as many times as you can to a place of comfortably being able to have a plan B in a worst case scenario.
Airbnb it.
Yeah. There's so many options.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many options right now for you. Housing is so scarce. Like, it's just one of those things where you just need to hang on to it. So from that, I mean, like from this perspective, because I just don't see. Okay.
So what do you tell your son, like Wesley? What do you tell, like you have children who are in this age, right?
Yeah,
that are ready and potentially able to buy. What do you tell them?
With Wesley, I think it's I want to tap back on what you say. It is totally the ability to see time. Now that lady going back, if I were to say to her 5 years ago, build this house is 145, she knows now.
Yeah.
So with me being in the business, with me, and Wesley has seen this, and my kids have all seen this, we've been able to see it go from here to here. I remember building houses in the 1/3. I remember building a Syntex.
You sound like an old man on a porch right now.
But dude, it was literally 5 years ago. I could build a house in Avon for 130, for 129.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I know I sound like an old man. So what I tell Wesley is buy a house.
Okay.
There are programs out there. There's ability to buy. And you can also buy, in areas that are just a little bit further out. And we need to rethink the way housing. You're going to start seeing more condos in Indy.
You have no
choice. See
choice.
more townhomes and more of that shared living experience. So we're going to have to get used to it.
So then I guess the thing I wonder too is what's the impact on, I mean, this is philosophical, theoretical. I get all of that. But to me, what I see is that this has a sprawl effect on a number of cities and metropolitan areas where in Indianapolis, you used to be able to buy in Indianapolis for a certain price. And then you went to the, donut counties that were not as developed. And then now you end up having to go out further and further and further in order to get things to be more price effective. So do you get ahead of that curve? If you're looking to build wealth, do you get early? Are you doing speculative based buying?
Whitestown. Like, do you buy in Whitestown 10 years ago and now you look like a genius because you guys bought a house in White? That's what I'm telling my people. Like, look, if you're willing to, because we've had the benefit of being able to see, like, look at Fortville. I remember Fortville was, I could build at Prairie Hollow for $120,000, but now look at Fortville.
What's amazing to me is like, I mean, this epidemic was coming years in the making.
Yeah.
Right. And like, shame on me. I was very demonstrative in saying that the housing market would struggle post pandemic. But all the data and research on earth said that it should, right? Anytime unemployment spikes above 6%, the housing market has a negative consequence on pricing or on demand. And partly because we've just never seen this much stimulus and this much divide between have and have nots as a byproduct of employment, right? The ones that have been most impacted by unemployment have been lower wage earning workers and unfortunately minorities and also those under 25. And so those that have the biggest need to build wealth have actually been most negatively impacted, which meant that there was no negative impact on the housing market, at least at this point in time. Right. So I missed that. Doesn't mean that, I'm still within my 18-month window.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I don't, and I think we all did, but we all did not. I don't think we all.
But this shortage has been coming for so long. Like, that's what's interesting to me. I went around and bought investment properties. My business bought investment properties, and I mean, the value of those things are up 40, 50% in 24 to 36 months. They weren't great deals at the time. You know, they were 90% of what their market value was, you know, where most people would tell you to buy at that 80% or so range if you're really looking to find a great investment from a buy and hold, or lower than 80% if possible. But, you know, I was probably 90 cents on the dollar, and now they're up to $1.50, $1.60 for what I paid for them.
Right.
And it to me, it made sense. You looked at demographic trends, you look at areas that are still undervalued compared to the metropolis. That's the approach that I'm taking if I'm young. I'm looking at what's still undervalued and what does population and demographic trends look like.
Look forward.
And then buy with the actual end in mind, with a longer term perspective.
Yes. Where a lot of us, we're still looking to be in the hot metro areas. If you look for the next up and coming metro area, you can get a deal. Yeah. It's a little, I mean, now I'm selling houses in Anderson, and they're going the same day too.
Yeah.
But instead of having 20 offers, there's maybe 6.
Yeah, which is interesting because you couldn't give the house away 10 years ago.
Right. And then, right.
Which is where you see the effect of sprawl.
Right.
Like, it's the reason why the house that we're sitting in right now, it's the reason why I bought it and spent so much time and energy on the remodel, was because I took a long-term approach that says I don't foresee mobility getting better. So I'm going to buy a ranch and own a ranch, because I see the demographic trends going towards ranch-based or single-story living for people. Mm-hmm. And then one side of the street and the other has a different price. I bought on the lower price side of the street.
Really?
Yeah. Because, well, I mean, so like,
we're in the hood here. Okay.
This is Geist gentrified.
Oh, this is. I was sitting there saying, "Oh, this is the good side of the street." I was saying,
yeah, exactly.
My side of the tracks wasn't this nice. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, so from a I said actual street. This roundabout right out here divides 2 school systems and 2 counties, right?
Got it.
This side of the street is a different school district, which oftentimes it trades at a 10 to 20% discount.
Right.
I don't believe that 20 years from now that same effect will exist.
Right.
Because there becomes a point of saturation in every market.
Homogenous, they just kind of bleed together.
Eventually you run out of real estate land-wise to develop on, which then changes the dynamic of the market itself. So I actually went and bought everything in like what would be a B neighborhood, because I see Bs appreciating faster than As.
And when there's a scarcity. So say this house comes up and you need a house, they're gonna be like, look, kids, y'all going to this school, like, because you can't find a house.
Correct.
That's just what's happening. So they're going to pay a premium regardless. If you need to find a house, you need a house, and they'll figure it out. When they're in this price district, they're probably going to go to private school anyway.
So right now, if somebody doesn't, if there's Gen Z, millennials, someone who has goals of independence financially, this is the last opportunity for wealth building. Because homeownership will become more and more unaffordable as we move along, and because I don't see any
barrier of entry.
It's
the barrier of entry. Like, that is what, when I was 19, the people that sold me my house, they were like, "Oh, you don't have a down payment? I'll give you your down payment." The seller gave me my down payment.
Yeah, you told that story. Yeah.
Like, you can't do that now.
Anymore, no.
That is crazy town.
Yeah.
But as the barrier of entry gets more difficult and more difficult, it's going to get more difficult for the disenfranchised, younger people, other people to get in to take advantage. And you just said renter versus a homeowner 80% wealth.
80 times almost. Yeah,
80 times
80x,
over
yeah.
a lifetime.
Yeah.
The numbers don't lie.
Yeah. You know, it's part of the great wealth divide that we're witnessing, right? It is unfortunate. It has been a train barreling down the tracks that I hope something is done to help that. And it's tough for me. For 2 weeks ago, we're talking about reducing or paying no taxes. Mm-hmm. And here I am talking about the negative impact of the wealth divide. And yet the reality is that you have to make the right choices from a long-term sustainability standpoint to build wealth, which is really nothing more than security, right? And so when you're looking at long-term security, it's how do you make decisions that provide you long-term security and sustainability? And in this case, homeownership from a numerics perspective makes you way out in front of competitors or against your peers or against everyone else who's currently renting. And so making compromises as a Gen Z or as a millennial or someone just now entering the home market will pay dividends later.
I tell people you have to change your paradigm. People, I have a Gen Z or anybody, we're all payment buyers. Most of us are payment. I have a $2 million.
Although right now, Mike, 20% of offers are cash.
Some are cash. Most of us, the lion's share, I have a $2 million buyer. What did he ask me? What's my payment? He wants to know what his payment is, right?
Yeah.
So even $2 million buyers we're all payment buyers, unless you're cash. So when someone comes to me and they say, you know what, I'm paying $1,200 a month and I want to buy a house, so I don't want to pay $1,200 a month. The thing that I had to get them to understand is that you're paying that $1,200 a month and you're not getting it back. If I own a house, I'm paying $1,200 a month. But at the end of that, I owe this. Hopefully the market says that my house is this, and then I literally get all that money back plus. Right. So when I have a client and they're like really bulking on that payment, I try to look, we're building wealth here. Yeah. You cannot afford to keep renting. If you need to buy, and you need to buy now.
I want to also add one thing that I think really, so we went into stay at home in April of last year with right before Easter when we were all going to get out for Easter Sunday. We went into that time frame. No, it's too soon. Okay. We went into that stay at home period with 61 contracts that were currently pending at the time. And we closed 61 of the 61 contracts, which at that time was pretty unheard of because there were people losing jobs and having cold feet and bailing out of contracts left and right. And so we kept all of them together. And one of the ways that I was able to do that, one, I have an amazing team, of course, with amazing people. But two was by having the conversation with people that goes, if everything goes to hell and you lose your job and you lose your ability to repay your payment, do you think that it will take you longer to be foreclosed on or longer to be evicted when you stop paying? And at the end of the day, it always takes you longer to be foreclosed on than it ever takes you to be evicted. You miss one payment, you show up on the eviction list. Yeah. You miss one payment, the mortgage company would love for you to make a new payment. In fact, they'll even talk with you about how they could restructure your loans if you're not able to make a payment. And they'll move you to a 40-year mortgage right now if you're unable to make a payment. And so homeownership also gives you the added security of even if you're unable to make the payments at some point in life because of hardship, you still have more of a runway to get back on track than you do by not owning.
You can be, I'm not advocating you miss your payments, but if you miss your payments and you call them and they do not want your house back, they're going to say, hey, can we split this payment up? They will even do, deferrals, forbearance. Forbearance. Yep. So owning a house, y'all, I just keep telling people, I just thank God that my mom bought a house and I was able to live and see that, because I don't know how different my life would be if I wouldn't have made the decision to do that.
Yeah. 34% of the wealth for the middle class is in their real estate. Yeah. And so we're talking about if that number gets shifted even more towards the top from a conglomerate of ownership standpoint, the way it's going now, where 20% of the market
what does this
is
look like?
bought by institutions.
50 years from now, when these Gen Zs are trying to retire, my house is my retirement. I can pull and live off of that. When you're a Gen Z and you haven't had that cumulative wealth, I mean, I guess that's why cryptocurrency, you're just gonna have to be good
Largely,
at other ways of, building wealth.
Yeah. That's the challenge, is you have to figure out then if the barrier of entry to homeownership is too high, then what other options do you have? Is it business ownership? Is it innovation? Is it trading of stocks? Is it trading of technology like a cryptocurrency? Yeah, there has to be a secondary avenue. Otherwise, the train is absolutely leaving the station at this point, and there's no slowing down the wealth divide. In fact, during the pandemic last year, Mike, 3 people now, as a byproduct of 2020, 3 people in America have a greater net worth than 50% of the entire country combined. 3 people. 50%. That's 150 plus million Americans who have less money combined than 3 people. We've seen this play out historically time and time again. We saw it in the 1900s. We saw it with the Roman empires. We've seen it with every other developed society. The scales always tip this direction without control measures in place. And we're going that direction, and we have been for 50 years now. However, you have a choice to make, which is you either figure out how the game is played and you play it that way, or you try to cash out at the end only to realize that there's nothing left.